early Randy was always jumping ahead. If something went wrong, I was gonna fight you. We was gonna argue. I was gonna cuss you out. In relationships, if I had a woman and she liked me and we argued, I had to win. I think I had to learn that sometimes winning is actually in conceding.
Welcome to Smoke and Mirrors Experience, where we enjoy premium cigars and engage in reflective conversation. My name is Juwan Hawkins. I'll be serving as your host today. We got the fellas with me. How y'all doing, fellas?
Hey, what's happening?
What up?
Good. That's what's up. And we're going to engage in a conversation, interactive conversation about topics relative to the male experience. We got a few ladies in the audience. Let's hear from the ladies.
All right.
That's right.
Fellas, where y'all at?
What up, dude?
All right. We still doing that. That's what's up. I love it. Appreciate the energy. We're going to dive into the topic of conflict resolution. But before we do that, I have to hear and introduce my fellas this evening. To my far left, my homeboy, known him since the 1990s. Let's give it up for my guy, Richie Harrison.
Richie.
Appreciate it.
To my immediate left, I've known this guy since the early 2000s. Dynamic individual from the great state of Georgia, Atlanta to be specific. Let's give it up for my homeboy, Brian Walker.
B. Walker.
To my immediate right, this dapper brother right here. Man, stand up real quick, man. We just gotta, man, appreciate the whole essence of the outfit. You know what I'm saying? The earth tone brother right here. Listen. One of my favorite baby boomers. Let's give it up for my guy, Randy Dudley.
In the house, y'all. In the house.
Last but not least, this is the brother that keeps us in line, but only on a Tuesday. It ain't Tuesday. My guy, one of my favorite millennials. Let's give it up for my guy, Will Fawcett.
Mr. Will. Hey. Will.
So we're talking about conflict resolution tonight, and this topic is really near and dear to the male experience because what we understand and know is that men are faced with conflict on a daily basis, almost hourly basis. If we talk about our work experience, we talk about sometimes our home experience, our experience with our children, our experience with aging parents, and just society as a whole. Right. Last episode, we talked about the essence of man and manliness and manhood. And one of the things that really connects to the male experience as we talk about the topic of conflict resolution is we're expected to resolve conflict with force. We're expected to be loud. We're expected to be boisterous. We're expected to use some 4-letter expletives, and we're expected to use our hands oftentimes, right? But what we understand and know is that as we evolve as men, as we become more knowledgeable about how to use our words and our experiences, that how we deal with conflict evolves along with that, right? And so what I'm interested in knowing, I'm going to start with my homeboy, Randy. You get the short straw today, okay? I need to know from you, like, what is it from your childhood that taught you how to deal with conflict, and how have you evolved from what you learned as a child in dealing with conflict as a grown-ass man?
Well, coming up, we were always reactionary. So if you're playing basketball, somebody snatch the basketball, you bust them in the mouth. If you're playing football, you run somebody over, you stiff arm them in the face. What I've learned as I evolved into a man is that conflict sometimes is just simple as just hearing your person out, talking to them, taking a step back. I think that we have to learn how to take a step back nowadays because everybody is reacting so fast, in the current climate. It's so many nuances going on where this person got something to say, this person got something to say, and everybody confrontational. And I think we have to learn how not to be confrontational and learn how to just really hear one another, That's what I believe I learned as I've gotten older is I'm always going to talk about listening. conflict it can end you in prison. It can end you dead. It can end you in so many ways. You can break up with your woman on something dumb that y'all had a conflict over that was nothing. I could have drank some orange juice out the refrigerator. You got mad because I put my mouth on it, and I don't want to face up to the fact that I'm putting my mouth on the orange juice. Now we fighting, we argue, and I'm telling you I want a divorce.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, just
that escalated quickly.
It always escalates. That's the thing about conflict, right? It escalates quickly, and you can never control it. And once it gets going,
So let me ask you this though, Randy. Starting out, let's go back to your childhood.
oh man, that's a long time ago.
I know, but I know you remember, man. I know you got those fast twitch muscles in the head still working. Okay, so with that being
I
said,
did in hell though.
like, what was the grab bag, if you will, that you learned growing up, and how did that evolve? Because you talked a lot about listening. You talked about, actively listening and engaging in dialogue in terms of resolving conflict. That's like 2025, Randy.
Right.
I'm thinking about like 19.
No, you got to go back to like 79, 80, Randy.
Yeah, that's the Randy I want to hear about first.
That Randy got his ass whooped a lot because he reacted. I learned quickly. If you got to watch who you reacting to, because you might get busted in the mouth. And so I had to pull back. Early Randy was always jumping ahead. If something went wrong, I was going to fight you. We was going to argue. I was going to cuss you out. In relationships, if I had a woman and she liked me and we argued, I had to win. I think I had to learn that sometimes winning is actually in conceding. And, you actually can win more when you learn how to take a step back. And I learned that from a woman, because most of the time women know that they're going to win. And we don't know that we know that they're going to win. But then they end up winning the argument because they already know, because they already did conceded in their mind how they're going to play you.
For sure.
Yeah, you said that like something wrong with learning from a woman, bro.
Man, I had to learn. I came from a woman, so my first teacher was my mama. And so I learned from her, sometimes the strongest person is the one that can concede in the midst of adversity.
Wow. Okay. That's huge. That's huge. The art of war, right? Absolutely. It's all in the strategy. So B, you said just as we were getting started, the Lord was still working on you in this area.
Yeah, and his son.
And what I want to know from you though is, what aspects of conflict do you struggle with the most?
Emotional regulation, I would say, right? I mean, essentially, people they know how to strike the right button at times, right? I mean, especially in relationships. I think one of the biggest things I tend to see in a lot of relationships, whether it's my friends, myself, and others, right, is that it can start off one way with one issue, right? But I think a lot of times when we respond as men, what happens is now we perceive to have the attitude. I still haven't figured out how that works. And then the conversation takes a turn. It's like, now I'm arguing about the fact that I don't have an attitude. So I'm getting frustrated. I cannot. And I try, but it's very hard at that point to try to steer the conversation back to the original problem description versus now I'm arguing about, who took the last match out the box, right? And the fact that I have an attitude. Like, why how did we get here? This makes no sense to me. I'm sure some of y'all probably struggle with that as well, but that's the biggest issue I have, right? Relationship wise, whether it's marriage or with my friends, right? How do we get here? We have one thing to do: resolve the original problem description.
Yes, it's easy to get rerouted from what the crux of the issue really is when you get caught up in all the gory details along the way, especially if someone feels offended. So Richie, I'm going to give you the tall task, because he just mentioned some of his struggles that he has dealing with conflict resolution. And we know that a situation can go from 0 to 100 real quick, if you don't have the tools, the strategies, the words to resolve the situation amicably. So like, how do you, within the context, because we talk about intimate partner relationships now, right? And marriage and the person that you're trying to walk through this world with, this crazy world with, and conquer it, right? But along the way, you don't see eye to eye all the time. So in your walk, how have you resolved those types of situations, and what tools do you use to create better outcomes?
I've messed up. I had to learn the hard way. I learned like everybody else learned, and you do have you make some mistakes on the road to figuring out how to handle situations appropriately, right? Find the right pressure, right? I don't want to be either, sort of, I don't want to exacerbate the situation. I don't want to, pour more fuel on it. As B said, I don't want it getting out of hand, but I also don't want to be avoidant, and I've done that at times. I don't want to talk about it, suppressing and holding it in and holding things back. And so what I've learned, and, I've acknowledged this, these are tactics that I've had to learn through either therapy or just talking to other folks. Those tactics that help me get to, one, recognizing my own ambivalence in the conversation. What are my own feelings? Am I scared? Am I afraid? Am I fearful? Do I feel insecure about something? So owning my own feelings. And then trying my best in whatever situation. And really what I'm indexing on right now is like in relationship because dealing with other situations might not always call for this. But I think that one strategy I found with dealing with conflict is like trying to find the emotional truth of the conversation. Like what's really being discussed here, between us. And so, and that's not always hard. I got to call on, what Randy always mentioned. You got to listen. A lot of times, we want to, talk, but sometimes it might require you to just listen, and listen intently and have to learn from the conversations. And so those are just a few of the things that I've learned, but again, that type of practice, practicing that in your relationship is different from practicing, conflict resolution with other folks. You might be ready, you might have to, I'm looking on that. Some of it comes off, our communications, when we talk about conflicts, it comes off as over the computer. You're like, did he send me this man? Like I'm talking to the computer screen, and working it out that way. But you learn how to do it.
Yeah. I mean, and that I want to pivot a little bit because that dichotomy between how we resolve conflict with the lady in our lives versus how we resolve conflict with another man, especially a man that we don't know and we don't have a relationship with, right, can be very different. And what we know about men in conflict is that when we have conflict with one another, it can end with someone losing their life. Men are exponentially more violent than women. Women can argue and yo mama this and you a bitch that for 30 minutes and nobody throws a blow. You get two men in conflict because he stepped on your shoes or he disrespected you and your lady or whatever the case may be, and somebody might not walk up out of there. That's the difference, right? And so that's why it's important that we engage in this dialogue, because this is about saving someone's livelihood. And so, Will, you work with youth and you work in the capacity of working with youth who may fall off the rails and may not necessarily always participate as their best selves or show up as their best selves. So what tools and strategies are you giving young men as they're trying to navigate this space of resolving conflict with guys that they may or may not even have a relationship with, or may even dehumanize that person to the point where it doesn't matter whether or not that person lives or dies? And I know that might sound hyperbolic, but all you have to do is turn on the news every day and we hear about somebody losing their lives over something trivial because we don't place that same value on people that we don't know versus people that we go home to every day. So, Will, how do you navigate those conversations?
Wow. That's loaded. I'll start there. But I'll reference a conversation I had with Randy. This had to be at least 2 months ago. And the conversation started between me and him with, to a hammer, the whole world looks like a nail, right? If that is the only tool I have, is the brute force, the anger, the animosity of being a man, my machismo, I am going to address the world as such. And there's only so many things that you can get done that way, right? If I got a hammer and I need to gently handle something, I'm going to destroy it in the process. And so for me, like I'm a nerd, right? I'm self-admitted. So I use things like comic books and different things like that. So in the comics, there's Superman, right? And we all know all the abilities that he has. However, there's one thing most people overlook so many times. 90% of the time, Superman is holding back, right? He has to be multiple things. Do I use my speed in this scenario? Do I use my strength in this scenario? Do I use my common sense, or do I use the ice breath? Whatever it demands at that time, that's what I have to use. It's not until a foe comes that now he can release the full might, the full brute of his strength that he engages, and now all bets are off. So I would say to anybody, use what you have, but you have to be able to differentiate what the moment demands for you. So if it requires me to use my speed to come to the rescue of my friend, I do that. If it requires me to be a listening ear to my brother, then I do that. If it requires me to be soft-spoken to my woman, then I do that. So that's a part of expanding ourselves for what is required of us.
So Randy, we know your story, but not everyone knows your story, right? And, we talked about the hammer and the nail and the tools in the toolbox and not always utilizing the right tool for the right situation. I want you to talk about the consequences of using the wrong tools as it pertains to conflict resolution, because as I mentioned before, there are real consequences to using the wrong words, using the wrong approach, the wrong tone. We've all suffered those consequences at some point in time, either in our personal lives or our professional lives. So I want you to share, what your experience has been with utilizing the wrong tools. We're going to go back to old Randy again.
Well, old Randy used the wrong tools all the time. Old Randy was always willing to sacrifice everything to prove his false bravado, what he thought he should be like. And so a lot of times you have to strip those predetermined definitions down, because most men operate out of a predetermined definition. Whether you tough, whether you not tough, what you got to prove, what you trying to prove. And when you get caught up trying to prove something, it always generally ends wrong. Whether you are a guy on the street and a guy step on your shoes. I remember a time where I was at a club and a guy stepped on a friend of mine's shoes and he killed him. Like, he killed him, and right there in my face. And I couldn't really say nothing because, that was a no snitch culture, right? And so you had to go through that. And then I ended up in trouble because I wouldn't say nothing. I was at a place one time where a guy wanted to take a guy's coat, a shirling. Back in the 80s, we had shirling coats. And somebody took a guy's coat, and my other friend killed the guy who tried to take the coat. And we couldn't say nothing, So when you put yourselves in situations where you lose control of the ability to make your right decision, that's when you lose. I was married before. My first marriage, a lot of times I did not know how to articulate myself in relation to my feelings. So I had to learn as I got divorced how to raise my son not to be a hoe, right? I mean, what's the first thing most people do when they get out of a relationship? They go get up under somebody else. And you be so caught up in trying to get up under who you trying to get up under, you bring them around. And that is only going to be a fleeting moment. And so now you done brought 10 fleeting moments around an impressionable young man who may look at that as, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do. And so you got to really catch yourself. And I had a really good friend of mine. He passed away from cancer. And when I first got my divorce, I was really mad at my first wife. And, I could share this. He told me, he said, man, don't you ever talk bad about her in front of your boy. And I had respected this guy. You know what I mean? So when he told me that, because the first thing I said, your mom ain't doing it. I went how we go. I wasn't making right decisions. I was mad. I was in my emotionals. Conflict was on the flow. And when he pulled me to the side, he said, man, don't do that. And so for me, it helped me start making the transition from the old Randy to the new Randy. And so when I started recognizing that I control those choices, we have to, as men, get to the space where we control our choices. That means you got to stop, think, and listen. I'm always going to harken on that, because if you don't stop, think, and listen, then that means you're just being influenced. So if somebody comes to you and say, man, you gonna let that nigga do this and that? And now you're reacting. And that reaction can get you 15 years. That reaction can get you on the run. That reaction can take a father away from a son, a father away from a mother. All those reactions always have dire consequences. And so you got to get to a space where when you are faced with making those decisions, you stop, look, and listen. And you say to yourself, hey, wait a minute. And I talk about my friend who passed away all the time because the truth is, I didn't even think he can teach me nothing because I didn't want to hear it. But when he was dying from cancer, you know, he started talking to me more. So I, for some reason, started listening. And when he started listening, I said, damn, you're right. And so now my son, truthfully, when I got divorced, he never saw me with another woman until I got remarried. And so I wanted him to get from that, you know, all women ain't this or all women ain't that and all men ain't supposed to be this and all men ain't supposed to that. You are the owner of your choices. And the choice is wait until you want somebody to be in your life for real before you move in a way that's going to reveal your intention. But your intentions always got to be pure. If your intentions ain't pure, then you just out here playing games. And that's what's wrong with all of us today. We playing games with each other. And that's why everybody unhappy. That's why guys don't trust women. That's why guys don't trust guys. That's why women don't trust men, is because everybody moving to satisfy a fleeting moment. You know, that's that, what's that called? That Euros love, right? You got what, agape, philia, and Euros, right? So you got that Euros love going. It's just a fleeting love. It's transient. It's like transient knowledge. It's simply passing by it, and it's passing by you. And that means you ain't grabbing nothing. So the person that I'm trying to be, or who I'm trying to be at almost 60, is I'm still learning. So I got a lot of life I ain't finna leave here, you know. So I'm embracing every day, learning a new lesson. Every day. You know, I got good friends in my life. I got good people in my life. When I met with Jawan, we was reading books to kids. And that was a choice for me because I had never done that. And so when I sat down and was talking to the kids and the feedback I got, it made me feel like a new person. And so that's what we have to start embracing as people, is how can you grow from what you were in this generation to where you need to be for this generation? And then how can you pass the new knowledge on to your next generation so that they can grow past what television is, right? Television is what? Tell a vision. So it's telling visions to our kids, even through music and TV. They got them sipping lean and drinking this and sleeping over here, and they all messed up. So we have to reverse that curse. We have to reverse that curse. Y'all, you got to really hear that. We have to reverse the curse that's on our people.
So Randy, in that vein, so now we have, let's give it up for Randy, for sure. So many nuggets, man, we can take from what you just said. And the nugget that I took away was that now we have a jigsaw. Now we have a Phillips screwdriver. You know, now we have these other tools that we can use to resolve old issues, right? And one of those tools, and I think it was Richie that touched on this, is we have emotional connection and emotional regulation, is what my man B said, that we can incorporate in regards to those conversations, those crucial conversations. But oftentimes, men being in touch with those emotions is categorized in a negative way. Oh, you're being too emotional. Oh, you're being sassy. And it causes men to go back into that shell of, I'm just going to be a hammer.
But what's the flip side of being sassy? If I'm considered sassy because I sit back and say, man, I ain't doing that, and then you tell me you acting sassy, then I'm looking at you like, oh, you ain't for me. So I don't even need to talk to you no more. And when you learn how to cut it at the root, it's all about pruning. The moment emotional regulation, emotional intelligence, a lot of us work in corporate America, right? And in corporate America, they give you these training classes, emotional intelligence. They talk about it all the time. And so once you start getting emotionally intelligent, then you understand what emotional unintelligence looks like. And so if I say to you, I got feelings and I don't want to abide by this set of rules, and you say you acting sassy, then I really got to look at you for who you are. The devil present himself, right? Oh, okay, you telling me a vision. I ain't gonna holler at your piece. And you learn to move on, and now you done cut something loose from your life, and they gonna sit back and wonder why you cut them loose. Now they may have to take a active look at themselves. And that's how people start growing. When you know yourself, know thyself. Once you know you, that's the first step in growth.
Yeah, but it ain't always that easy, right? I mean, I get it. I get what you're saying, and cutting them off, but sometimes you're married. You're married, right? And things slip out, things happen, right? I mean, I don't think anybody has gone without some type of debate or argument, whatever you want to classify it as, in your relationship or your marriage, right? And then, just the way we are as men and as women, I feel like there's a high percent of the time, especially in the early stages of being married, where someone may say, "Hey, you're sassy. You're being sassy," right? I would love to say what I want to say. I'm not gonna say it right here, but I would love to say certain things, but I at this point I haven't. It's not easy to just cut the rope, right? You need to be able to create a safe place and talk about that. But then it goes back to what I started at the beginning, right? Now I'm arguing about something that was not the original issue. You're talking to me sideways, and now I'm having a whole nother argument about the non-issue.
Right, about the way you were being addressed in trying to.
So that means you just got to
address the
learn how to
issue.
circle back to the truth. I mean, at the end of the day, as a therapist and as a social worker, you always have to be able to bring it back to where it started. So that, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm hearing you say I'm reacting like this. And you put the ball back in their court. And once you put the ball back in their court, if they can't articulate what they're trying to say, and if it's against the actual theme of the conversation, then you can stop it. Oh, you changing the subject.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So you have to learn how to stop, look, and listen. Oh, hey, you changing the subject. Oh, since you changed the subject, let me get us back on track.
So I went down that road because I want everyone to self-reflect, right? I want everyone in here to self-reflect, to understand that you may take a detour. However, depending on how you look at marriage or a relationship, and I'm a very traditional guy, right? The man is the head of the household. So if he tries to redirect that conversation, please don't continue on the detour.
Right. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, because part of the vision that you have to have as that traditional man is to understand where we're trying to go together.
Right.
Right. And if we're trying to go somewhere together, and I'm not walking in front of you, I'm not walking behind you, I'm walking beside you, then when you go left, guess what? I got to bring you back to center. You go right, I got to bring you back to center. Not for me, but for the greater good of us as a collective, right? And so ultimately that deflection is that detour. And it's okay to call people out if they're not trying to keep the main thing. To me, that's not being argumentative. That's sticking to the vision.
Right.
All right. So with that being said, we already know what time it is. We need some audience questions. We want to hear from you all. We want to hear what your viewpoint is on what we just discussed for the last few minutes. If there's anything you agree with, disagree with, something that struck a chord during the conversation, this is your opportunity to share your thoughts. We have a microphone that's set up in the room for you to step to and have your question addressed at that point in time.
Hi, I'm Shaylee. I'm nervous. I don't like speaking in front of people. But so this conversation is about conflict, right? And something that I've been thinking about lately is as it relates to intimate partner relationships and marriages. I want to know, do you problem solve in front of your children?
I'm sorry, can you say the last portion again?
Do you problem solve in front of your children? Like maybe they see you argue, right? But and then they see that everything's okay again. But they don't see how you came to the okay again part. And I feel like that's important because it's, as I self-reflect sometimes, sorry guys, I realize that I've never seen conflict resolution in my household. And I realize that I am avoidant when it comes to conflict resolution. And I think that's the reason why. And I want to know, do you guys have conflict resolution in front of your children?
I'll start with that one. So I empathize with where you're at because I can reflect on that from a personal experience. What I have learned is probably similar to you. We all saw mom, dad get into it, argue, whatever it may be, cuss, blah, blah, blah. And then the next day, all things are done fair and equal, right? Going on like nothing happened. And so what happens is it is that conflict resolution, but it's that intimate partner conflict resolution that goes on in the bedroom with the door closed and the lights are off. And I turn to you and I say, you know what? My bad. Let me rub your feet. Let me submit myself to you, right? As a man, let me submit myself to you and apologize earnestly. And that's not something that we are taught to show. However, as now a father, and I've referenced it before, we can show it to our children by doing it with them. Whether it be blowing up over the dishes, right? For me, growing up, that was my chore in the house. You got to wash the dishes every day, every night. There was never a time that my mother came to me and said, I apologize for yelling at you about not doing the dishes. But you know who did? My dad. My father came to me and said, listen, it's your job. This is your responsibility. And the expectation is for you to fulfill it. Now, when you don't do it, what should be the recourse? You give me the answer. And then I can relay that message. So having clear lines of communication is a really big thing, which I understand. However, relationships dictate how those things occur, and they also have to be learned. We have to learn how do you receive communication? What do you hear? Can you take your feelings out of what is being said? I feel like is not a valid response. So let me do this. You saying, I feel like you're not listening to me is not a valid response. I feel like you not paying attention to me is not a valid response. Tell me what's actually happening. Tell me what I did to you so that way I can solve the problem. This is how men think. So now we go back to that reference of communication or finding the different crayons that match, whatever you want to say. How do we communicate and communicate effectively? And this is what we now have to learn. This is what we exhibit, and this is what we teach.
So I'm gonna take it a little differently. So essentially, the answer to your question for me is no, right? As my man Will said, right? Conflict is resolved in the room amongst myself and my wife, right? However, there's also an opportunity to resolve conflict outside of the room without including your wife, but with your kids. Because if you do these things in front of your kids, if you're arguing with your wife or your mate in front of your kids, you have another conflict that you have to resolve, right? So you may have to take a car ride. You may have to go out to lunch or do something, right? And have a conversation or just walk outside or just catch them even when they don't expect it and have a conversation and say, you know, that you were wrong. I apologize to you as the man of the house, as my child, son or daughter, right? That is not how you lead a home. However, your mom and I, we're in a better place. We had a conversation and we were willing to take that next step to make sure that there was some unity in this house. And we want to always display love to our kids.
All right, we got one more question.
All right, my name is Maurice Jones, Mo Jones to be. professional. Everybody calls me Mo. But I'm hearing confrontation or conflict resolution, and I took away a couple key things, and I'm going to circle back. First off, anytime there's a confrontation, I do realize that it's missing a mature conversation and observation to determine how to step back, when to step back. And sometimes you got to know the qualities of the person or people that you're talking to. Now, that being said, how do you deal with it when, let's say it's not your wife, let's say it's not your child, but it's just a regular person, you love them, love them, love them. They're always present, but every time they're present, they seem to stink up the room. Any one of y'all gonna answer that?
Can you repeat that question?
He basically said some
Hey, I ain't throwing no bricks up here. I'm just saying.
some of y'all friends' attitudes stink.
Yeah.
That's what I heard.
Yes.
Or a reframe is, what if it's not the attitude? What if the person is just not a good person for you to continue to be around?
Let me expound on it just a
Okay, go
little
ahead.
bit more. What if it's you don't see it, but everybody else sees it?
Yeah. Ooh.
Everybody else sees the person you show up with just stinks up the room, and that's your man. This my girl.
That's your man. Yeah.
How do you deal with that in a way that doesn't cause conflict with that person? Because deep down, they probably are a good person, but most people don't give them that deep down moment, nor should they, if they're that reckless. How would you approach that?
I would say that you approach it directly, because one thing that I've learned in having longstanding relationships with other men, I'll just talk about my relationship with other men, is that we go through seasons in our lives and we aren't always able to articulate what season we're currently in. I could be in a season of depression. I could be in a season of anxiety. I could be in a season of loss. And I'm not just talking about loss of a loved one. It could be loss of my health. I got a bad report from the doctor, and now I have to change my eating habits. Now I have to change the way that I move. It could be loss of a job. Now I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to make ends meet. We know as men, if those ends not meeting, it can play on our mind and our psyche, right? So I try to lead directly with those conversations, but also with empathy, understanding that they might be in a season that I may not understand or be privy to, that's making them stink up the room, right? It's like, if you don't pay attention to those bananas and you're trying to make a smoothie, you bought them on Monday, you make that smoothie on Thursday, you're going to have a lot of rotten bananas, right? And it's not going to make a good smoothie. But that attention to those details, how is my man dressing? How is he taking care of himself? What's his hygiene looking like? What are the signs that I can look at in this individual to determine if they're really on their square or they're really going through something in a dark place? We have to be open as men to having those conversations, as a saying, you a or why you always got something negative to say. Maybe there's a reason he's got something negative to say, because he's in a negative season internally and he hasn't quite navigated that space. So I take the direct approach, because I understand that there might be something that man needs to get off his chest, and I might be the only person in front of him at that given time that he's willing to have that conversation with, because I led with empathy and directness.
All right.
The last question is, and that was a very, very good answer, but typically when you have someone when you have someone like that life around you in your life, they actually infect other people that are close to you in your life. How soon do you do that? Right away? Do you take it like, maybe I'm just seeing it, but everybody actually sees it? Do you cut them off? What is the actual approach? Let's say they don't realize that you're empathetic. Let's say they just don't get it. What do you do?
Yeah. I mean, as men, and I'm sure everybody up here, at some point in time, we've had that homeboy that we've had to have that come to Jesus conversation with, or homegirl that we've had to have that come to Jesus conversation with, like an intervention, so to speak. Mm-hmm. Hey, Randy, man, this B, he ain't wearing the fly shirts no more. I ain't talked to him in a minute. He hadn't been coming to Smoke and Mirrors, right? So if we really are connected to our friends and to our loved ones, then we can understand what their patterns are and when they start to break those patterns. And so it might start with Randy and I having a sidebar conversation about, hey, what's going on with B? When was the last time you talked to him? Oh man, 2 weeks for me. Oh, 3 weeks for me. And then when I did talk to him, he was real short with me. That's not like him. Hey man, let's invite him out for dinner. Let's invite him out for a cigar, man, and just chop it up with him. Beautiful. Let him know somebody's thinking about him, somebody cares about him. And then we can get down to the crux of what the issue really is.
Correct.
Yeah, because we will always open up to our friends, right? When we're amongst each other. If it's just one or two of us, we're going, let some drinks get to flowing. I'm gonna let you know what's really going on with me, man. Like, seriously. But like, for that infectious person you're talking about, essentially, I think you have to take the approach gradually, right? Because you can't just take what one person say, one group of people say, right? But if it happens twice, that's almost too many times. What happens at this point, dog, you only hanging with me when it's just me and you. I can't take you over here, bro. It ain't happening. First of all, you don't know how to talk to people. You don't know how to manage yourself, right? And like you're ruining my potential relationships or relationships that I've currently or already curated. And I love these people. So I'm not going to let you ruin that for me. But as for you and I, we can hang out together, just us. But you can't go here with me, bro.
The point of just bringing that up was just to state that sometimes our conflicts come from other people outside of the relationship we're in. That's what I was getting at.
There you go.
No doubt. Appreciate you,
that.
brother.
All right.
Appreciate the audience today. Thank you for your energy. Give it up for yourselves. This has been the Smoke and Mirrors Experience. We thank you all for tuning in. If you're checking us out on YouTube, make sure you like and subscribe. We will see you next time. Give it up one more time for the panel. We'll see you.